The rope bit into Lucinda Blackwood's wrists as she stood trembling on the wooden platform, her heart pounding so wildly she thought it might burst from her chest. The auction block beneath her feet had seen many sales before: cattle, horses, land, but never a woman of her standing. The jeering crowd gathered in the dusty main street of Redemption Creek seemed to pulse with a collective malice that made her stomach turn. It was 1875, and the West was still wild, but even here there were supposed to be rules, laws. Yet Sheriff Howell had declared her punishment would set an example after she'd been caught helping slaves escape north. One night of service to the highest bidder, a humiliation designed to break her spirit and warn others against defying the powerful men who ran this town. $5 for the troublemaker, someone shouted, triggering a wave of laughter. 10, called another, a heavy-set man whose grin revealed tobacco-stained teeth. Lucinda kept her chin high, though tears threatened. 22 years of life, and her fate now hung on the whims of these men. Her father's distant farm couldn't save her, nor could her reputation as the schoolteacher who had come to bring education to this rough town. She had believed in justice and equality. Now she was paying the price. $20. The voice belonged to William Stark, the saloon owner whose wandering hands she'd slapped away just last month. Sheriff Howell grinned beneath his thick mustache. "I see $20. Do I hear 25? 50? The crowd parted as a tall figure stepped forward. Lucinda's gaze fell upon a stranger. Dust coated his long coat, and his hat shadowed piercing eyes. A revolver hung at his hip, and the silver spurs on his boots clinked softly as he approached. She had never seen him before, yet something in his steady gaze made her breath catch. $50 from the stranger, Sheriff Howell announced, surprise evident in his voice. "Anyone care to top that?" the crowd murmured, but no one spoke up. "Sold," declared the sheriff with a swift bang of his gavel. "The lady's yours for the night, Cowboy." The stranger stepped closer, those eyes blue as a summer sky never leaving hers. "You've got it wrong, Sheriff," he said, his voice deep and measured. "I'm not buying a night." He reached into his coat and tossed a small leather pouch onto the platform. Gold coins spilled out, far more than $50 worth. "I'm buying her freedom," the stranger stated. "And you should know, madam." He tipped his hat toward Lucinda. "You'll only know mercy with me." With that, he stepped onto the platform and cut her bonds with a swift flick of his knife. "Name's Xavier Reeves," he said quietly as he helped her down. "And I believe we should leave this town. Now." Lucinda couldn't find her voice as he led her through the muttering crowd. Sheriff Howell started to protest, but fell silent when Xavier's hand moved to his holster. "My belongings," she managed to whisper, "at the boarding house." "We'll get them," he assured her, "but we need to move quickly." As they walked down the street, Lucinda felt the stares of the townspeople burning into her back. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why would you help me?" Xavier Reeves glanced down at her, his expression unreadable. "Let's just say I've seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes, Miss Blackwood." "How do you know my name?" Word travels. "The school teacher helping runaways. That's the kind of story that spreads." He guided her toward the stables. "Now, we need to be gone before the sheriff remembers he has a badge and a gun." Within the hour, they were riding away from Redemption Creek, Lucinda's few possessions packed behind her on a chestnut mare Xavier had purchased from the livery. The setting sun painted the open plains in hues of gold and crimson, and for the first time since her arrest, Lucinda felt like she could breathe again. But as the town disappeared behind them, a new fear gripped her. She was alone with a stranger, riding into the wilderness. She had escaped one danger, but what awaited her now? "Where are we going?" she asked, drawing her horse alongside his. Xavier pointed toward the distant mountains. I have a cabin near the Sweetwater River. You'll be safe there until we figure out your next steps." "And what do you want in return?" The question was blunt, but necessary. He turned to her, his expression softening. "Nothing, Miss Blackwood. Contrary to what you've seen today, not all men act out of self-interest." Lucinda wasn't sure she believed him, but as the vast Wyoming landscape unfolded before them, she realized she had little choice but to trust this mysterious cowboy who had appeared like a guardian angel in her darkest hour. They rode in silence as the stars began to appear overhead, each lost in their own thoughts, the rhythm of hoofbeats marking the beginning of a journey neither had anticipated. The night grew cold as they continued their journey, the vast Wyoming sky a canopy of stars above them. Xavier led them off the main trail, following paths that seemed invisible to Lucinda's untrained eye. After hours of riding, her body ached with exhaustion, and her mind struggled to process everything that had happened. "Not much farther now," Xavier said, noticing her fatigue. "There's a small creek ahead where we can rest for the night." True to his word, they soon arrived at a gurgling stream nestled in a small clearing among cottonwoods. Xavier dismounted with practiced ease and came to help Lucinda down from her horse. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground. "First time riding this long?" he asked, steadying her with a gentle grip on her arm. "Is it that obvious?" she replied, attempting a smile despite her discomfort. "Everyone starts somewhere." He began unloading their supplies. "Why don't you sit while I set up camp?" Lucinda watched as Xavier moved with efficiency, tending to the horses before gathering wood for a small fire. The flames soon cast a warm glow across their small camp, and the aroma of coffee filled the air as he hung a pot over the fire. "I have some jerky and hardtack," he offered, passing her a tin cup of steaming coffee. "Not much of a supper, but it'll keep us going." "Thank you." She accepted the simple meal gratefully. After a few moments of silence, she asked, "How did you know what was happening in town today?" Xavier settled back against his saddle, his hat pushed back slightly on his head. "I was passing through, heard the commotion. Asked a local what was going on, and they told me about the schoolteacher being auctioned for helping slaves escape." "Former slaves," Lucinda corrected. "The war ended 10 years ago, but some men here still think they can own people." Xavier nodded. "Some men don't change just because the law does." "No, they don't." She stared into the fire. "The Thompson family, a mother and 2 children, they were being hunted by bounty hunters hired by their former master. I only gave them shelter for one night and helped them continue north toward Montana." Her voice broke slightly. "I didn't think anyone had seen them." "Someone always sees," Xavier said quietly, "especially in small towns." "Why did you help me?" she asked again, needing to understand. "You could have kept riding, it wasn't your fight." He was silent for a long moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "I was a scout for the Union Army during the war," he finally said. "Saw things that change a man. After it ended, I thought the suffering would stop, but it just took new forms." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "Sometimes a man has to make a stand even when it's not his fight, especially then." Lucinda studied him in the firelight. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. She guessed him to be in his early 30s, though the war had likely aged him beyond his years. "Well, I'm grateful," she said simply. "Though I'm not sure what I'll do now. I can't go back to Redemption Creek. We'll figure that out once we reach my cabin. It's isolated but comfortable enough. You can stay as long as you need to gather your bearings." As the fire began to die down, Xavier prepared their sleeping arrangements, laying out a bedroll for her and positioning his own on the opposite side of the fire. "Get some rest, Miss Blackwood. We have a long ride tomorrow." "Lucinda," she said. "Please call me Lucinda." A small smile touched his lips. "Good night, Lucinda." As she lay beneath the star-filled sky, the events of the day replayed in her mind. She had woken this morning a respected teacher, become a prisoner by noon, and now found herself fleeing with a stranger as night fell. Her life had been upended in the span of hours, yet strangely, she felt safer with this quiet cowboy than she had in weeks back in town. Sleep came eventually, but her dreams were filled with the jeering faces of the auction crowd and the steady blue eyes of the man who had saved her. Morning arrived with a pale golden light filtering through the cottonwood leaves. Lucinda woke to find Xavier already up, tending to the horses and preparing a simple breakfast. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing her a cup of fresh coffee. "Better than I expected to," she admitted, gratefully accepting the warm drink. "How much farther to your cabin? If we keep a good pace, we should be there by sundown." He glanced up at the clear sky. "Weather's holding, which is in our favor." They ate quickly, packed up camp, and were on the trail again as the sun climbed higher. The landscape changed as they rode, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen. Lucinda found herself captivated by the wild beauty surrounding them, so different from the dusty streets of Redemption Creek. "It's beautiful out here," she remarked as they followed a winding path upward. "That it is," Xavier agreed. "First time I saw these mountains, I knew this was where I belonged. Not too many people, plenty of space to breathe." "Have you lived alone all this time?" A shadow passed over his face. "Not always. I had a wife once, Sarah. Yellow fever took her 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Lucinda said softly. He nodded in acknowledgement but offered nothing more. The personal revelation hung between them as they continued their journey, a small piece of trust extended. As the day progressed, they talked intermittently. Xavier pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the land and its history. Lucinda told him about growing up on her father's farm in Pennsylvania, her decision to become a teacher, and her journey west seeking purpose after losing her mother to consumption. "I thought I could make a difference," she said. "Bring education to children who wouldn't have it otherwise." "You were making a difference," Xavier countered. "Those children you helped escape, you changed their lives, and nearly lost my own in the process." "Freedom always comes at a cost," he said quietly. "Question is whether it's worth paying." "It is," she answered without hesitation. "I'd do it again." He studied her with newfound respect. "I believe you would." By mid-afternoon, they began climbing steeper terrain. Xavier led them through a narrow pass, then down into a hidden valley cradled by mountains. Nestled against the tree line stood a sturdy log cabin with smoke rising from its stone chimney. "Someone's there," Lucinda said, alarm rising in her voice. "That would be Benjamin," Xavier explained. "Old trapper who watches the place when I'm gone. Good man. Saved my life once during a blizzard." As they approached, an elderly man with a long white beard emerged from the cabin. He raised a hand in greeting, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Xavier, didn't expect you back so soon." His eyes shifted to Lucinda, and with company, no less. Xavier dismounted and shook the old man's hand. "Benjamin, this is Miss Lucinda Blackwood. She'll be staying with us for a while." Benjamin tipped his hat to her. "Madam, any friend of Xavier's is welcome here." Xavier helped Lucinda down from her horse. "Benjamin makes the best venison stew this side of the Mississippi. Hope you're hungry." "Starving," she admitted, suddenly aware of how little they'd eaten during their journey. The cabin was larger than it appeared from outside, with a main room featuring a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and doors leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. Simple but clean, with pelts adorning the walls and handcrafted furniture throughout. "You can have the back room," Xavier said, carrying her small bag. "It's not much, but there's a real bed and privacy." "Thank you." She followed him to a small but tidy bedroom containing a bed with a quilt, a wooden chest, and a small window overlooking the forest. "I'll let you get settled. Supper should be ready soon." Left alone, Lucinda sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. She was miles from civilization, dependent on the kindness of a man she barely knew. Yet she felt safer than she had in weeks. She unpacked her few belongings: a spare dress, her mother's Bible, a hairbrush, and the book of poetry she'd been reading to her students just days ago. Such simple objects, yet they represented everything she had left in the world. When she emerged from the bedroom, the aroma of Benjamin's stew filled the cabin. The men sat at the table, deep in conversation that halted when she appeared. "Just in time," Benjamin said, ladling stew into a bowl for her. "Sit, eat. You look like you could use a good meal." Over dinner, Xavier explained to Benjamin a simplified version of how they had met, omitting the details of the auction. "Trouble in town," he said vaguely. "Miss Blackwood needed to leave in a hurry." Benjamin nodded, asking no further questions. "Well, you're welcome here as long as you need, miss. Not many comforts, but it's peaceful." "I appreciate that," Lucinda said sincerely, "and the stew is wonderful." After the meal, Benjamin announced he would return to his own cabin a mile downriver. "Been away from my own bed long enough," he said, gathering his few belongings. "But I'll stop by tomorrow with some supplies." Once Benjamin had departed, an awkward silence fell between Lucinda and Xavier. They were truly alone now, a reality that brought both relief and uncertainty. "I should check on the horses," Xavier said, standing abruptly. "Make yourself comfortable. There are books on that shelf if you'd like to read." Left alone, Lucinda explored the cabin more thoroughly. The bookshelf he'd mentioned held an eclectic collection: works by Thoreau and Emerson, practical guides to survival and tracking, and surprisingly, several volumes of poetry. She ran her fingers along the spines, pausing at a well-worn copy of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Outside, she could hear Xavier moving about, tending to the animals and securing the property for the night. In this moment of solitude, the enormity of her situation washed over her. She was an outlaw now, unable to return to her profession or the life she had built. The future stretched before her, unknown and uncertain. When Xavier returned, he found her standing by the fire, the Whitman book open in her hands. "You like poetry?" he asked, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I do. I'm surprised you do as well." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "There's more to most cowboys than meets the eye, Miss Blackwood." "Lucinda," she reminded him. "And I'm beginning to see that." The morning light filtered through the cabin's small windows, waking Lucinda from the deepest sleep she'd had in days. For a moment she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her until memory rushed back. The auction. The escape. Xavier. She dressed quickly in her spare dress, ran her fingers through her long brown hair, and stepped into the main room. Xavier was nowhere to be seen, but a note lay on the table next to a cup and a pot of coffee still warm on the stove. "Gone hunting. Back by midday. Help yourself to breakfast." Lucinda poured herself coffee and found bread and preserves in the small pantry. As she ate, she contemplated her situation. The immediate danger had passed, but what now? She couldn't hide in this cabin forever, yet returning to any town nearby would risk recognition. After breakfast, she stepped outside into the crisp mountain air. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by pines, with a view of the valley below. A vegetable garden grew to one side, and a small barn housed the horses. Beyond that, the wilderness stretched endlessly, beautiful and intimidating. Deciding to make herself useful, Lucinda tended to the garden, pulling weeds and watering the plants. The physical labor felt good after days of tension and fear. As the sun climbed higher, she explored the area immediately surrounding the cabin, careful not to venture too far. Near a small stream that ran behind the property, she discovered a patch of wildflowers in brilliant blue and yellow. On impulse, she gathered a small bouquet, thinking they might brighten the cabin's rustic interior. She was arranging the flowers in a mason jar when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Through the window, she saw Xavier returning, a deer carcass draped over the back of his horse. She watched as he dismounted and began the process of dressing the animal, his movements efficient and practiced. When he entered the cabin some time later, he carried cuts of venison wrapped in cloth. He paused at the sight of the flowers on the table. "I hope you don't mind," Lucinda said. "I found them by the stream. No, it's nice." His voice held a note of surprise. "It's been a long time since there were flowers in this cabin. I wanted to thank you for everything. I know I'm an imposition, you're not," he interrupted, setting down the meat. "Actually, I've been thinking about your situation. Benjamin is heading to Fort Collins next week for supplies. It's far enough from Redemption Creek that you might be safe there. You could start over, maybe find a teaching position." The suggestion was practical, logical even, yet Lucinda felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "You're eager to be rid of me, Mr. Reeves." "Xavier," he corrected. "And no, that's not it. I just thought you'd want to resume your life, your profession." "I do, eventually," she hesitated. "But I'm not sure I'm ready to face the world just yet." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then stay as long as you need. No rush." The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Xavier taught Lucinda the basics of cabin life: how to chop wood, maintain the fire, preserve food. She helped with cooking and cleaning, and in the evenings, they often read by the firelight. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories of their pasts, and sometimes they sat in companionable silence. Benjamin visited as promised, bringing supplies and news from the nearest settlement. "No word about a missing schoolteacher," he reported. "Seems they're keeping your disappearance quiet." "Or they're glad to be rid of me," Lucinda suggested. "Their loss," Benjamin said with a wink. A week passed, then two. Lucinda's fear gradually subsided, replaced by a growing appreciation for the simple life in the mountains. She found herself watching Xavier when he wasn't aware, the way his hands moved as he worked, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. One evening, as they sat before the fire, Xavier asked, "Do you miss teaching?" "Every day," she admitted. "There's nothing quite like seeing a child's face light up when they understand something for the first time." "You're good at explaining things," he observed. "You've been patient with me, teaching you survival skills." She laughed. "Hardly the same as grammar and arithmetic. Knowledge is knowledge." He paused, seeming to debate something internally. "I've been thinking. There are families scattered throughout these mountains, children who never get any formal education. Maybe you could teach them." Lucinda sat up straighter. "Like a circuit teacher, traveling from homestead to homestead." "Something like that. It wouldn't be easy, and the pay would be whatever families could offer, likely food and goods more than money. But it would be teaching." The idea took root in her mind, growing with possibility. "I could do that. I would need to travel, though. I could help, at least at first, show you the safe routes, introduce you to the families." He hesitated. "If you wanted." Their eyes met across the firelight, and something shifted between them, a recognition of a future neither had anticipated. "I would like that," she said softly. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Xavier's hand moved instinctively to his gun as he rose to answer it. Benjamin stood outside, his expression grave. "Riders coming up the valley," he reported. "4 of them armed, been asking about a missing schoolteacher and the man who took her." Lucinda's blood ran cold. "How did they find us?" "Doesn't matter," Xavier said, his voice hard. "Benjamin, take Lucinda through the back trail to your cabin. I'll deal with them." "No," Lucinda protested. "I won't let you face danger because of me. This isn't up for debate." Xavier was already checking his rifle. "Benjamin, go now." "Come on, miss," the old trapper urged. "Xavier can handle himself." Reluctantly, Lucinda grabbed her shawl and followed Benjamin out the back door. As they slipped into the forest, she looked back to see Xavier positioning himself on the cabin's porch, rifle in hand, waiting for the approaching riders. The fear she thought she had left behind returned in full force as she disappeared into the darkness, wondering if she would ever see Xavier again. The forest path was narrow and treacherous in the growing darkness, but Benjamin moved with the confidence of decades spent in these mountains. Lucinda followed closely, her mind racing with worry for Xavier. They had traveled perhaps half a mile when the sound of gunshots echoed through the valley. "Keep moving," Benjamin urged when she instinctively turned back. "We can't just leave him," Lucinda protested. "Xavier knows what he's doing. Our job is to get you to safety." They pressed on, but each step away from the cabin felt like a betrayal. After what seemed an eternity, they reached Benjamin's cabin, a smaller, more rustic version of Xavier's home. "Wait here," Benjamin instructed, lighting a lamp. "I'll go back and check on Xavier." "I'm coming with you." The old man shook his head firmly. "No, you're not. Those men are looking for you. You'll stay put if you want to help Xavier." Reluctantly, Lucinda agreed. As Benjamin disappeared back into the night, she paced the small cabin, jumping at every sound from the forest. An hour passed with excruciating slowness. Finally, she heard footsteps approaching and grabbed the only weapon available, a cast iron skillet. The door opened to reveal Benjamin supporting a grimacing Xavier whose left arm was stained with blood. "Xavier?" Lucinda dropped the skillet and rushed to help. "What happened?" "Just a graze," Xavier grunted as they helped him to a chair. "I've had worse shaving." "Don't listen to him," Benjamin said. "Bullet tore right through his arm. He needs tending." Lucinda quickly gathered water and clean cloths while Benjamin retrieved a bottle of whiskey and medical supplies. Working together, they cleaned and bandaged Xavier's wound. "The men?" Lucinda asked quietly as she tied off the bandage. "Won't be bothering us again," Xavier said grimly. 2 ran off. One's nursing a bullet in his leg, the 4th. He didn't finish, but his expression told her enough. "They were bounty hunters," Benjamin explained. "Sheriff in Redemption Creek put out word that Xavier kidnapped you, offering a reward for your return and his capture." "This is my fault," Lucinda whispered, her hands trembling as she wiped blood from Xavier's arm. "No," Xavier said firmly, catching her hand in his. "This is on Sheriff Howell and men like him who think they can own people." Their eyes met, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Despite his injury, despite the danger still lurking, she felt that same strange safety in his presence. "We need to leave," Benjamin said, breaking the moment. "Those 2 who ran off will bring back more trouble. You can't stay in these mountains now." "Where can we go?" Lucinda asked. Xavier and Benjamin exchanged a look. "I have a friend in Colorado," Xavier said. "Runs a ranch near Denver." "We could head there, lie low for a while." "It's a long journey," Benjamin warned, "and you're injured." "I'll manage." Xavier stood, wincing slightly. "We'll leave at first light. Benjamin, can you get word to Jim Carson about what happened? Tell him to watch his back. Consider it done." They spent a restless night at Benjamin's cabin, taking turns keeping watch. Lucinda insisted on the first shift, allowing Xavier to rest. As she sat by the window, rifle across her lap, she watched him sleep. Despite his injury, his face looked peaceful, the hard lines softened. It struck her then, with sudden clarity, how much her life had changed in just weeks. She had lost her position, her security, her plans for the future. Yet sitting here, watching over this man who had risked everything for her, she couldn't bring herself to regret the path that had brought her here. Morning came with a gray drizzle that matched their somber mood. They prepared to leave while Benjamin packed supplies for their journey. "Take the mountain trails south," he advised Xavier. "Avoid the main roads until you're well past the territorial line." Xavier nodded, adjusting his sling. "We'll send word when we reach Denver." Benjamin turned to Lucinda. "You take care of him, young lady. He's stubborn as a mule and twice as likely to ignore an injury." "I will," she promised, embracing the old man. "Thank you for everything." They set off as dawn broke fully, keeping to the forest paths as Benjamin had suggested. Xavier rode slightly ahead, scanning for any sign of pursuit while Lucinda followed closely behind. His injured arm clearly pained him, though he tried to hide it. "We should stop," she suggested after several hours of riding. "You need to rest." "Not yet," he replied, his voice tight. "Need more distance between us and trouble." By midday, the rain had stopped, but the trails were muddy and treacherous. They picked their way carefully through narrow passes and across swollen streams. Lucinda found herself drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. As the sun began to set, they finally reached a sheltered clearing deemed safe enough to make camp. Xavier nearly collapsed as he dismounted, his face pale with exhaustion and pain. "Let me see your arm," Lucinda insisted, helping him sit against a tree trunk. "It's fine," he protested weakly. "It's not fine. You're burning up." She placed a hand on his forehead, alarmed at the heat radiating from his skin. "You have a fever." She worked quickly, setting up camp and building a small fire before turning her attention to his wound. When she unwrapped the bandage, her heart sank. The edges of the wound were red and inflamed, with angry streaks extending up his arm. "This is infected," she said, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "We need to clean it properly." Xavier watched through fever-bright eyes as she boiled water and prepared fresh bandages. "You're good at this," he murmured. "My father taught me basic doctoring," she explained, soaking a cloth in the hot water. "This will hurt." He gritted his teeth but made no sound as she cleaned the wound thoroughly, then applied a poultice of herbs Benjamin had provided. "Try to rest now," she said, covering him with a blanket. "I'll keep watch." Throughout the night, Lucinda tended to Xavier as his fever rose and fell. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling out names she didn't recognize. Once he grabbed her hand, his eyes clear for a moment. "Lucinda," he said urgently. "If I don't make it, don't talk like that," she interrupted fiercely. "You're going to be fine." "Listen to me," he insisted. "If I don't, head to the Circle C ranch outside Denver. Ask for Cole Callahan. Tell him Xavier sent you, he'll help." "We're going there together," she said, blinking back tears. "You're not leaving me now, Xavier Reeves." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before he slipped back into fevered sleep. Morning brought no improvement. If anything, Xavier seemed worse, barely conscious and burning with fever. Lucinda knew they couldn't stay where they were, but she also knew he couldn't ride in his condition. As she pondered their dire situation, she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. Grabbing the rifle, she positioned herself between Xavier and the approaching riders, prepared to defend him with her life if necessary. 3 horsemen emerged from the trees, and Lucinda's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the lead rider called out a familiar name. "Xavier." "Xavier Reeves, you ornery cuss, is that you? Who's asking?" Lucinda called back, not lowering the rifle. The riders stopped, hands raised non-threateningly. "Name's Cole Callahan," the lead rider answered. "Xavier's an old friend. Benjamin sent a message that he was in trouble." Relief flooded through her. "He's hurt," she said, lowering the weapon. "Badly." Cole dismounted quickly, approaching with concern evident on his weathered face. "Madam, I'm guessing you're the schoolteacher he rescued." "Lucinda Blackwood," she confirmed. Cole knelt beside Xavier, examining him with practiced eyes. "Infection's bad. We need to get him to my ranch. My wife was a nurse during the war. She'll know what to do." With careful efficiency, Cole and his men constructed a travois to transport Xavier. They secured him as comfortably as possible, and within the hour they were moving again, headed south toward Colorado. "Benjamin's message reached us yesterday," Cole explained as they rode. "Said you two were in trouble, heading our way. We rode out immediately to intercept you." "Thank you," Lucinda said, overwhelmed by this unexpected assistance. "I didn't know what I was going to do." Cole gave her a reassuring smile. "Xavier's like a brother to me. Saved my life more than once. Whatever trouble you're in, you're under my protection now." They rode hard through the day, stopping only when necessary. Xavier remained unconscious, his breathing labored. By nightfall, Lucinda was nearly delirious with exhaustion and worry, but Cole assured her they would reach his ranch by morning. True to his word, as dawn broke, they crested a hill to reveal a sprawling ranch nestled in a verdant valley. Buildings clustered around a large main house, with corrals and pastures stretching into the distance. "Welcome to Circle C Ranch," Cole said as they approached. They were met in the yard by a slender woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her expression shifted from welcome to concern as she saw the travois. "Xavier," she gasped, hurrying forward. "Gunshot wound, Mary," Cole explained as he dismounted. "Infection set in bad." Mary's face set with determination. "Bring him to the guest room. I'll need hot water, my medical kit, and whiskey." Her gaze fell on Lucinda. "You must be Miss Blackwood. Come with me, you look dead on your feet." The next hours passed in a blur as Mary worked tirelessly to save Xavier's life. She cleaned the wound thoroughly, draining the infection and applying medicines that filled the room with pungent odors. Lucinda assisted as best she could, following Mary's efficient instructions despite her exhaustion. "He's strong," Mary said as they finally finished, "and stubborn. If anyone can pull through this, it's Xavier Reeves." "Thank you," Lucinda whispered, her voice breaking with emotion, "for everything." Mary squeezed her hand. "Now you need rest yourself. There's a room prepared for you. I'll sit with Xavier." "I'd rather stay with him," Lucinda insisted. Mary studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. I'll bring you some food and fresh clothes." Left alone with Xavier, Lucinda took his hand in hers. His skin was still hot with fever, but his breathing seemed steadier. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered fiercely. "Not after everything we've been through." She dozed in the chair beside his bed, waking whenever he stirred or moaned. Mary checked on them regularly, changing bandages and administering medicines. Cole appeared occasionally, his face grave with concern for his friend. By the second day, Xavier's fever broke. Lucinda was sponging his brow when his eyes fluttered open, clear and focused for the first time in days. "Lucinda." His voice was weak but steady. "I'm here," she said, relief washing over her. "We made it to Cole's ranch. You're going to be all right." He squeezed her hand weakly. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed." The words came out more forcefully than she intended. "Did you think I would abandon you?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Thought maybe you'd come to your senses, realize you're better off without a troublemaking cowboy." "Well, I haven't come to my senses yet," she replied, blinking back tears of relief. "So you're stuck with me for now." Over the next week, Xavier's strength gradually returned. Lucinda remained by his side, reading to him, helping him with meals, and simply talking. They shared stories of their lives before they met, filling in the blank spaces of their knowledge of each other. Mary and Cole proved to be gracious hosts, welcoming Lucinda as if she were family. Mary, in particular, seemed to understand the deepening bond between Lucinda and Xavier, often finding reasons to leave them alone together. Cole sent telegrams to some contacts. Mary informed them one evening as they sat on the porch. "Sheriff Howell has been suspended pending investigation. Seems your escape caused quite a stir, Lucinda. Several townspeople came forward about his corrupt practices." "That won't stop him from wanting revenge," Xavier cautioned. "Perhaps not," Cole agreed, joining them with glasses of whiskey. "But his reach doesn't extend to Colorado. You're safe here for as long as you want to stay." As Xavier recovered, Lucinda began helping around the ranch. She discovered an unexpected talent for working with horses and enjoyed assisting Mary with the household accounts. For the first time since leaving Redemption Creek, she began to consider a future beyond mere survival. One clear autumn afternoon, nearly a month after their arrival, Xavier found Lucinda in the apple orchard, gathering fruit for Mary's preserves. "Thought I might find you here," he said, approaching with only a slight limp remaining from his injury. "Need some help, always," she smiled, handing him a basket. "You're looking well today, feeling better every day thanks to you." He reached for an apple, his arm brushing against hers. "Lucinda, I've been thinking about what happens next." Her heart skipped. They had carefully avoided this topic, content to live in the present while Xavier healed. "And what have you decided?" "Cole's offered me a position here, helping manage the ranch." He paused, watching her reaction. "And there's talk of starting a school for the ranch children and those from neighboring properties. They need a teacher." Lucinda's breath caught. "Are you suggesting we stay?" "I'm suggesting we consider it." He set down the basket, taking her hands in his. "Unless you had other plans." "My only plan was to stay with you," she admitted softly. "Wherever that might be." Xavier's eyes darkened with emotion. "When I saw you on that auction block, something inside me changed. I'd been wandering for years, never staying anywhere long. But when I look at you, I see a future I want to be part of." "Xavier, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it hasn't been long, and God knows our circumstances have been unusual, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Lucinda Blackwood. I think I've loved you since that first night by the campfire when you told me you'd help those people all over again. Consequences be damned." Tears filled her eyes. "I love you too. I've been afraid to say it, afraid that once you recovered you'd want to move on alone." "Never." He cupped her face in his hands. "I'm not offering you perfect safety or even an easy life, but I promise you won't face any of it alone. You'll only know mercy with me, Lucinda, and love, always love. That's all I need," she whispered as he lowered his lips to hers. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the intensity of feelings long held in check. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Marry me," Xavier said, the words more statement than question. "Not because you need protection or because we're thrown together by circumstance, but because you want the same future I do." "Yes," Lucinda answered without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding took place 2 weeks later on the ranch. A simple ceremony attended by Cole and Mary, Benjamin, who had traveled down from Wyoming, and the ranch hands who had come to respect both Xavier and Lucinda. Mary had helped sew a wedding dress from cream-colored silk ordered from Denver, and Cole had given Xavier a new suit for the occasion. As they exchanged vows beneath an archway of autumn leaves, Lucinda reflected on the strange path that had led her to this moment. The humiliation of the auction block seemed a lifetime ago, transformed now into the first chapter of an unexpected love story. "You may kiss your bride," the minister announced, and Xavier did so with a tenderness that brought tears to Lucinda's eyes. The celebration afterward was joyful, with music and dancing lasting well into the night. As evening fell, Xavier led Lucinda away from the festivities toward a small cabin at the edge of the ranch property. "Our home," he explained, opening the door to reveal a cozy interior furnished with a mix of new items and treasured possessions from his Wyoming cabin. "Cole's wedding gift to us." "It's perfect," Lucinda breathed, taking in the bookshelves already filled with their combined collection, the large bed covered with a quilt Mary had made, and the writing desk positioned by the window clearly meant for lesson planning. "There's something else," Xavier said, leading her to the desk. "Open the drawer." Inside, she found official papers appointing her as teacher for the newly established Circle C school, along with supplies, books, and a small brass bell. "School starts whenever you're ready," Xavier explained. "There are 15 children already enrolled from the ranch and neighboring properties." Lucinda turned to him, overcome with emotion. "You've given me everything I ever wanted." "No," he corrected gently, drawing her into his arms. "We found it together." As winter settled over the Colorado foothills, Lucinda and Xavier established their new life. The school opened in a converted barn near the main house, with Lucinda teaching children ranging from 5 to 16 years old. Her reputation as an excellent educator spread quickly, and soon families from miles around were sending their children to learn from Mrs. Reeves. Xavier thrived in his role at the ranch, his natural leadership and knowledge of the land making him invaluable to Cole. The two men worked together seamlessly, expanding the ranch's operations and introducing new breeding stock that promised to improve their herds. News eventually reached them that Sheriff Howell had been removed from office and charged with corruption, largely due to testimony from townspeople emboldened by Lucinda's escape. The bounty on Xavier had been withdrawn, though they remained cautious about returning to Wyoming. "Maybe someday," Xavier said when they discussed it, "but not now. Our life is here." Their first Christmas as husband and wife was celebrated with their new extended family at the main house. Gifts were exchanged, carols sung, and stories shared around a massive tree that Cole's men had brought down from the mountains. "I have something for you," Xavier told Lucinda privately when they returned to their cabin that night. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, she found a delicate silver locket. When opened, it contained a tiny sketch of the two of them, expertly rendered by one of the ranch hands with artistic talent. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching the image gently. "Turn it over," Xavier suggested. Engraved on the back were the words that had begun their journey: "You'll only know mercy with me." "And love," Lucinda added, echoing his proposal in the orchard. "Always love." As winter gave way to spring, their happiness grew deeper roots. They worked hard during the days, Lucinda with her students, Xavier with the ranch, and spent evenings together in their cabin, reading, talking, and loving each other with increasing devotion. In late April, as wildflowers began carpeting the meadows, Lucinda shared news that brought tears of joy to Xavier's eyes. "A baby?" he asked, his voice hushed with wonder as he placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "You're certain?" Mary confirmed it. Lucinda nodded, her face glowing. "By Christmas, there will be 3 of us." Xavier gathered her in his arms, overwhelmed with emotion. "I never thought I could be this happy again after Sarah died. I'd resigned myself to a solitary life. And I never imagined finding love in such unlikely circumstances," Lucinda admitted. Being auctioned as punishment was the worst moment of my life, until it became the beginning of the best part. Their son, Benjamin Cole Reeves, was born on a snowy December night with Mary serving as midwife. He had Xavier's blue eyes and Lucinda's determined chin, a perfect blend of both parents. "He's beautiful," Xavier whispered, cradling his son with careful hands that had once known only work and warfare. Perfect. As Benjamin grew, so did the school and the ranch. Lucinda eventually hired an assistant teacher to help with the increasing number of students. Xavier became Cole's full partner when the older man began considering retirement. 2 years after Benjamin's birth, their family expanded again with the arrival of a daughter, Sarah Mary Reeves, named for the important women in their lives, Xavier's first wife and their dear friend, who had helped save his life. Life wasn't always easy. The West remained wild in many ways, with harsh winters, occasional drought, and the constant challenges of frontier living. But Xavier and Lucinda faced each difficulty together, their bond only strengthening with each obstacle overcome. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they rode to a hilltop overlooking the ranch, now partly theirs after Cole had transferred ownership shares to Xavier. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked as they sat side by side, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold. "Coming west?" "Everything that happened," Lucinda considered the question seriously. "I regret the suffering of others, the families I couldn't help, the injustices that still exist. But us? No, not for a moment." She leaned against him, his arm automatically encircling her shoulders. "That day on the auction block, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning." Xavier kissed her temples softly. "I rode into Redemption Creek that day with no plan to stay, just passing through as always. Then I saw you standing there, chin up despite everything, and something told me my wandering days were done." "Good thing you listened," Lucinda teased. "Best decision I ever made," he agreed. As they rode back to their cabin where Benjamin and Sarah waited with Mary, Lucinda reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From schoolteacher to outlaw to beloved wife, mother, and respected educator. From auction block to freedom to love. The West was changing around them, growing more settled with each passing year. Railroads stretched across the country, bringing new people and ideas. The wild frontier was slowly being tamed, but some things remained constant: the beauty of the mountains, the challenge of the land, and the love that had transformed two solitary souls into a family. That night, with their children sleeping soundly and the future stretching bright before them, Xavier and Lucinda held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together. From the darkest moment of Lucinda's life had come a love story neither could have imagined, proof that even in the Wild West, mercy and second chances could be found in the most unexpected places. Years passed, and the Circle C Ranch prospered under Xavier and Cole's partnership. As Cole gradually stepped back from daily operations, Xavier took on more responsibility, proving himself not just a skilled rancher but a fair and respected employer. The ranch hands looked to him for leadership, and neighboring ranchers sought his advice on everything from breeding stock to water rights. Lucinda's school grew in reputation and size. What had begun as a one-room schoolhouse with 15 students expanded to a proper building with multiple classrooms and over 50 children in attendance. She hired additional teachers, mostly young women from back east seeking adventure and purpose in the West. But she remained the heart of the school, beloved by students and parents alike. Benjamin and Sarah grew into thoughtful, capable children who embodied the best qualities of both parents. Benjamin showed Xavier's affinity for the land and animals, while Sarah inherited Lucinda's passion for learning and justice. Both children thrived in the freedom of ranch life while receiving the education their mother insisted was essential for their future. 10 years into their marriage, Lucinda and Xavier welcomed a surprise addition to their family twins, a boy and girl they named James and Elizabeth. The twins brought renewed joy and, admittedly, chaos to their household, keeping them young as they approached middle age. 4 children, Xavier marveled one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, the twins asleep in their laps while Benjamin and Sarah played with the ranch dogs in the yard. If someone had told me this would be my life when I was riding alone through Wyoming, I'd have called them crazy. And yet, here we are, Lucinda smiled, shifting sleeping Elizabeth to a more comfortable position. Would you change anything? Xavier considered the question, his eyes tracing the familiar lines of the land they now called home. Not a single thing. Every step, every choice led us here, even the hard ones. The hardest moment had come 5 years earlier when news reached them that Sheriff Howell, after serving a brief prison sentence for corruption, had been released and was reportedly seeking revenge. For weeks, they had lived in heightened vigilance, Xavier never without his gun, ranch hands keeping special watch. But Howell never appeared, and eventually word came that he had died in a saloon brawl in Texas, his hatred extinguished without ever reaching its target. I thought I might feel relief when we heard, Lucinda had confessed at the time. Instead, I just feel sad for a life so consumed by bitterness. That's because you have a compassionate heart, Xavier had replied. It's one of the many reasons I love you. That compassion extended to many who crossed their path over the years. The Reeves home became known as a safe haven for those in need, runaway brides fleeing abusive matches, former slaves still searching for security decades after emancipation, orphan children needing temporary shelter. Lucinda and Xavier never turned away anyone truly in need, remembering too well their own desperate circumstances when they first met. Their 20th anniversary was celebrated with a grand party at the main ranch house, now primarily their residence, since Cole and Mary had moved to a smaller cottage nearby. Friends gathered from near and far, including Benjamin the trapper, now in his 80s but still spry enough to make the journey from Wyoming. Never thought I'd see the day when this lone wolf would be surrounded by cubs, the old man chuckled, watching Xavier with his children. Does my heart good? He wasn't meant to be alone, Lucinda said softly. None of us are, really. As the West continued to change around them, with statehood, railroads, and increasing settlement transforming the frontier, Xavier and Lucinda adapted while maintaining the core values that had guided them from the beginning: justice, compassion, education, and family. Benjamin, their firstborn, eventually took over management of the ranch when Xavier and Cole decided to step back. He married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, bringing 2 prominent families together and expanding their holdings. Sarah, true to her mother's influence, became a lawyer after studying back east, one of the first female attorneys in Colorado. She returned to practice near the ranch, often representing those who couldn't otherwise afford legal help. The twins found their own paths, James as a skilled horse trainer whose methods were sought after throughout the West, and Elizabeth as a teacher who eventually took over leadership of the school her mother had founded. In their later years, with their children established and the ranch thriving under Benjamin's management, Xavier and Lucinda had time to reflect on the remarkable journey that had brought them together. Do you ever wonder about what might have happened if you hadn't ridden into Redemption Creek that day? Lucinda asked one evening as they sat on their porch, now in their 60s but still healthy and active. Xavier took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after decades together. Sometimes, I might have continued wandering, never finding a home. I likely wouldn't have survived that night, she said quietly. Or if I had, something essential in me would have died. He squeezed her hand, acknowledging the darkness they had overcome together. Instead, we found each other, built all this. He gestured to the ranch spread out before them, to the school visible in the distance, to the homes where their children and grandchildren now lived. From an auction block to this, Lucinda marveled. Life takes strange turns. The best kind of strange, Xavier agreed. Leaning over to kiss her softly, in their 70s, they began to slow down physically but remained mentally sharp. Xavier spent hours with their grandchildren, teaching them to ride and track and respect the land. Lucinda wrote down the story of their meeting and early days together, creating a family history that would be passed down through generations. I want them to understand where they came from, she explained when Xavier found her writing late one night. How something beautiful can grow from terrible circumstances. You think they'll believe it? He asked, settling beside her. It sounds like something from a dime novel. Truth is often stranger than fiction, she smiled, touching his weathered cheek. But it's our truth. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Xavier and Lucinda renewed the vows they had made so long ago. The ranch had changed, expanded, modernized in some ways, but the essential spirit of the place and of their union remained constant. I promised you would only know mercy with me, Xavier said, his voice softer with age but still carrying the strength that had first drawn her to him. I hope I've kept that promise. That and so much more, Lucinda replied, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You gave me a life I couldn't have imagined that day in Redemption Creek. A home, a family, purpose. You gave me the same, he said simply. Everything I have, everything I am, began with you. As twilight settled over the Colorado ranch that had been their home for half a century, Xavier and Lucinda stood hand in hand, watching their legacy continue in the faces and actions of their descendants. From the darkest moment of an auction block punishment had come decades of love, service, and family, a reminder that even in the wild places of the world, and in the darkest circumstances, mercy and love could take root and flourish. The journey that began with a desperate rescue had become a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of choosing love over hatred, mercy over vengeance. In a West that had been wild but was now increasingly tamed, their story remained a powerful reminder that the greatest frontier of all was the human heart, and the greatest adventure was finding someone to share it with. And as the stars appeared overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first night together by a campfire so many years ago, Xavier and Lucinda Reeves knew with absolute certainty that every step of their remarkable journey had been worth taking, for it had led them home to each other.